It is a pleasure to be with you. As a reminder for housekeeping, please direct all of your questions during the live Q&A sessions throughout today's event to the WebEx Q&A section of the WebEx platform. That will allow participants in today's event to engage more openly during the chat in the chat box. So please, as a reminder, to do that. And now, again, my name is Beth Butler, Beth Butler Fatal, and I am Executive Director of Disability in North Carolina, and I want to welcome you to the 2021 Fall Conference. It is the honor and privilege to be working with just a tremendous team. And this event, Everybody Works, the role of a disability employment community collaborative, is today's event. And we are going to focus specifically on best practices in supported and customized employment, and featuring discussions on the how employment providers can build and sustain stronger collaboratives with their employment networks, as well as with hiring managers. And finally, we're going to share with you the North Carolina Employment Collaborative NC Works video as well towards the end of today's event. And this initiative was funded through the North Carolina Employment Collaborative through the North Carolina Council on Developmental Disabilities. And we look forward to sharing that with you. And finally, it is a tremendous, with great gratitude that we thank Cardinal Innovations, who is our host sponsor for today's event. And now let's hear directly from the Chief Executive Officer and the Chief People Officer from Cardinal Innovations.
First off, I want to start out by saying thank you to Disability in North Carolina for sponsoring today's conversation and allowing us to be a partner. Also, thank you to Train Technologies for providing the technical support. Today, you're going to learn from folks with disabilities that have employment or are seeking employment, the employers that are hiring those individuals, and employment service agencies that are doing the innovative work to get those individuals hired.
Thanks, Trey. Cardinal Innovations sponsored Everybody Works, the role of a community employment collaborative, in order to expand the conversation on disability employment and inclusion. It has been important for us at Cardinal to have an inclusive workplace by hiring individuals with diverse thinking, skills, and lived experiences that reflect the members that we serve. There are 3 points that this conference will address today. 1, it takes a collaborative effort among people with disabilities, providers of employment services, and the businesses that hire them to expand employment opportunities. 2, the business community is seeking the talents and skills of people with disabilities in the workforce. And 3, the entire community works when everybody is working.
So on behalf of Disability in North Carolina, Cardinal Innovations, Train Technology, thank you for joining today. Thank you for being part of the conversation. We hope you enjoy it.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much, Trey. And now it is my pleasure to introduce just a tremendous friend to disability in North Carolina, and just a great leader and champion of disability inclusion, Chris Egan. He's the Senior Director for Employment and Inclusion with the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services, who will introduce our keynote for today's event. Chris?
And Pat, and good morning, everyone. It is truly my pleasure and privilege to join you today for this important conference presentation. And what a great way to kick off NDEAM, or National Disability Employment Awareness Month 2021. And this year's NDEAM theme is America's Recovery, Powered by Inclusion. This national theme pairs perfectly with the theme of our fall conference today. I'm proud that our state's working hard to spread the news that Everybody Works is important to businesses and to the individuals who make up a huge, untapped, and very capable workforce. And in spite of the COVID pandemic, our North Carolina economy is bouncing back, but to keep this going strong and to grow our economy, we need to expand our vision of diversity and equity in employment. On March 28, 2019, that's when it was, Governor Roy Cooper took the bold step of signing Executive Order 92, leading to North Carolina being recognized federally as an employment first state. What is employment first, you may ask? Well, it means that we believe that all citizens, including people with significant disabilities, are capable of fully participating in employment that is integrated and inclusive and in community life. North Carolina is focusing more intently than ever on diversity in state government employment because it will create a stronger North Carolina workforce. And our efforts are intended to further encourage the private sector to make the same commitment. Employment is one of the most sought after personal outcomes for all of us. And the benefits to businesses are numerous. It boils down to the work being done well, better trends in workforce stability, better internal organizational culture, and the data is clear that profits increase. And as such, Alan Bergman is the perfect keynote speaker to discuss employment strategies in more depth with us today. I'm sure you've reviewed Alan's short bio, and I'd like to add a few more details about his deep and lengthy experience and commitment to employment for everyone. Alan has been highly focused on inclusive employment for over 30 of his more than 45 years in the field, working and advocating locally, statewide, and as a federal expert. His expertise includes transition from school to adult life, inclusive community living and day supports, supported and customized employment, person-centered planning, interagency collaboration and capacity building, infrastructure design, provider transformation, rate reimbursement methodology and braided funding, and the list goes on. He's well-versed in federal policies and funding with an emphasis on Medicaid, Medicare, managed care and long-term services and supports policy, practice, and financing. And he understands the private sector, serving as CEO for 6 nonprofit agencies over the years. Here in North Carolina, we're updating our Olmstead Plan, which in a nutshell is the plan for expanding community life for people who are at risk of or who currently live in segregated settings, and Alan has provided expert assistance to the Employment Committee. The North Carolina Council on Developmental Disabilities featured a series of webinars with Alan, which are still available on their site. I encourage you to visit those. And finally, and most importantly, Alan is a parent champion for his 2 daughters, Dina and Mindy. Both experience independence and success with integrated and competitive employment and community life. I'm quoting from Alan's bio about his daughter, Mindy, who experiences significant disabilities secondary to Rett syndrome, quoting, "Today, she continues in her customized employment with new duties and tasks and additional hours. Mindy has also begun to have, quote unquote, a voice at 46 years of age using augmentative communication and eye gaze technology. And each day is a new opportunity for Mindy to show others that the terrible labels that were applied to her for most of her life have no validity. Mindy clearly demonstrates the application of the quote, 'It's never too early and it's never too late.' Alan, we welcome you back to North Carolina and we look forward to learning from you today."
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Chris, for that very wonderful introduction. I sincerely appreciate it. And thank you, Beth and Pat. I am honored and privileged to be part of this fall conference. And as Chris said, to help kick off National Disability Employment and Awareness Month 2021. He's done a wonderful overview of all the outcomes from the employer perspective, and there's volumes of data on that. I'm not going to be covering that today, but I'm really pleased to be here to go into some depth, but quickly, of what is it going to take to make employment first a real policy and funding and outcome priority for all, and I want to underline all, persons in North Carolina living with a developmental disability, or for that matter, any other type of disability. You will have sets of the slides available to you. And so I'm ready now, and hopefully the technology will work for us. And I'm going to hit what's called shared screen. All right. All right, here we go, ladies and gentlemen. And you have these slides available to you. I'm going to focus on 5 essential elements. There are others for employment first in your state: high expectations, interagency collaboration, capacity building, provider transformation, and payment for outcomes. Everybody works, everybody can work. Zero reject is where we have to be, and we know how to do that today. So it all started way back when with this gentleman, Dr. Mark Gold. I hope some of you are familiar with Try Another Way, which was his entry into this field in the 1970s with what there you see is a Bendix bicycle brake assembly, for those who remember the old-fashioned two-wheel bikes that you put the brakes on with your pedal. This is a gentleman who is blind and has significant intellectual disability at Dixon State School in Illinois. Mark may be looking like a hippie. He was a full PhD professor at the University of Illinois, Champaign-Urbana, well-published, a founder of CASH, and unfortunately taken from us at the young age of 53 from Hodgkin's lymphoma. He laid out the beginning of anybody can learn if we know how to teach, so that we stop blaming the victim with the label. It was the precursor of what we now call customized employment. I had the opportunity to bring him to an agency I was running in San Francisco in 1978-79, where he did this with 3 people in the agency who were either in sheltered work or day hab, who weren't supposed to be able to work, and they all mastered the break within about 15 minutes of instruction and blew the staff away. 10 years later, that sheltered workshop closed. So what do we know from our own history that we don't practice? And again, you're going to hear Alan's bias. We've got to stop blaming the victim. The slow learner isn't the person with the disability. It's the systems, the clinicians, the field, and the professionals. We're all stuck. The continuum of services and readiness come from the medical model. They don't work, and we have great data on that from the late 70s, early 80s in Oregon and Washington. Tom Bellamy and Dave Manx studied for 20 years the numbers of people leaving education into the adult system and moving school to the day program, to then we used to have work activity and then sheltered work and then group and enclave and whatever. And cutting to the chase, you were 67.2 years of age if you got your first job. It doesn't work. It's phony. We set it up on a medical model and any exit criteria and readiness. There is not one piece of literature that supports that. Mark Gold, besides giving us Try Another Way, taught us place and train, don't train and place. Again, key rules for today. And he said employers, as you heard Chris mention, higher competency. They're not worried about the deviancy was the term then. They want to know, what can the person do for me? And Mark Gold published 6 articles that IQ does not correlate with productivity. Supported employment came from Bellamy and Mank and Paul Wayman at Virginia Commonwealth, was put in the Rehab Act, folks, in 1986. Supported employment legally is 35 years old. On the mental health side, it was then replicated specifically with individualized placement and support by Dr. Drake at Dartmouth in the 80s and 90s. Customized employment by Mike Callahan and Mark Gold and Associates got started in the early 90s, and self-employment by Hammis and Griffin in the mid to late 90s. None of these are new tools. They've been around for a long time. We just don't use them. And Heraclitus laid it up beautifully for us. The only constant in life is change, and most of us are resistant to change. We get stuck. We are creatures of habit. We've got to let go. You can read this for yourself. The expectations that go with stigma are killing lots of people with disabilities in this country, depriving them of quality of life outcomes. So discovery, which is part of customized employment, is a term that came actually from a scientist, all right? Looking at the same thing as everyone else and thinking something different. Don't look at somebody with Down syndrome and say, oh, well, people like that, or somebody who uses a wheelchair, or somebody who doesn't see so well or hear so well. Right away, we think stigma, we think limitations. Get it out. Every person is different, no different than any of the rest of us. Just because somebody has blue eyes or no hair or long hair or is overweight or underweight doesn't tell us anything about the person, but we get caught in making assumptions. We've got to let that go. All right. Here's a great quote from John, a self-advocate in New Hampshire, and this applies to every one of us. Chris said it earlier in his introduction. Employment gives us a purpose in life. Think about any time you meet a new person. What do you say? Hi, I'm Alan. Oh, hi, Pat. Nice to meet you. Next question. What do you do? That's part of our culture. Oh, I sit in a day program and I color. Or I'm in a sheltered workshop and I assemble widgets and I make 40 cents an hour. Not acceptable. Not acceptable. And John lays it out beautifully as a self-advocate. And quickly on the policy side, again, the Developmental Disability Assistance and Bill of Rights Act, which funds your council, disability rights, the University Center, et cetera, in all states, was amended 31 years ago. 31. And this is for people with 3 or more substantial functional limitations out of 7. This isn't for folks with mild disabilities. It's more targeted. Competence, capabilities, and look at this language because it's in every federal law now. Strengths, resources, priorities, concerns, abilities, and capabilities. We've eliminated the medical model of deficit fixing broken people. We've got to rid ourselves. It doesn't mean that we ignore people's health issues or PT issues or OT issues or speech language, but that isn't the goal of a quality of life. It's got to be functional. The issue isn't walking, it's mobility. It isn't talking, it's communication. I learned those lessons long ago from superb therapists. Okay? And here's the ADA, also 1990, bipartisan, and most of you don't look at findings, but I'm a policy wonk as well. And it's important to understand part of the reason we have a civil rights law, and I bolded it out, beyond the discrimination, cost the United States billions in unnecessary expenses resulting from dependency and non-productivity. And I'm going to show you that hasn't budged very much in 30 years. It's painful to read that the primary definition for somebody with a significant disability is dependency and non-productivity. And here you go. Pre-pandemic, Bureau of Labor Statistics, don't get caught up, please, in unemployment statistics. They're misleading. Get caught up in workforce participation or employment participation. This tells us people who are working or seeking employment. You will notice close to 80% of the population without disabilities are either working or seeking employment. On the other hand, only 33.8% of people with any type of disability, 31.2% mental disability. So that means basically 68% are neither working nor seeking employment. And then if we drill it down to cognitive disability and SSI, a major target subpopulation, 11.1% working or seeking work, which means 89% are not working or looking for employment. They're doing nothing meaningful in their lives. And then if we look at our own internal data from the University of Massachusetts on people receiving DD services related to employment, your state has dropped from 2014 to 18. I'm not sure why. And the US average is 21. Real quickly, Washington State is the winner. Why? Because when you enter adult system, you don't get to say, I won't work. You must spend at least 9 months in trial work, job training, and tryout. They have staff who are certified and trained, and look at the outcome. Oregon and Rhode Island are worth following. They both had Olmstead ADA type litigation. Their numbers have moved up dramatically over the last several years. They'll probably be reaching Washington or Oklahoma in the next year or two because they're under court order and settlement to build their capacity for competitive integrated employment and get out of the business of sheltered workshop and segregated day. So here's SSI data, pretty fresh. Look at that. 4.6 million people, 18 to 64. Less than 5 out of 100 are reporting any earned income. 95 out of 100 are not. Ties to the other data I just showed you. And the whopping income is $396 a month. Don't spend it all in one place. How much do typical providers get paid in North Carolina? Figure that out. And here's the pain one, ladies and gentlemen. For 19 years in a row, the biggest group of people in the United States living in poverty are people with disabilities, 22.5%. It is the single best synonym to define an adult with a significant disability, poverty. After all these years of laws and special ed and rehab and all of that. And then look at our friends in Medicaid, okay? 2011, I never thought I would see this. I'm not going to read it to you, but work is fundamental to all of us, all right? And there are benefits, physical, mental health benefits. For those of you who are MCOs on here, there's money to be saved and people feel better. This is, again, CMS, ladies and gentlemen, Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services. All individuals, regardless of disability and age, can work. Notice this is their words, not Alan's, and work optimally, each person's strengths and interests, contribution, and go to the next one. This is in the 2014 regs for person-centered planning and the whole community integration stuff. Strengths, preferences, and needs, straight out of the DD Act, also in IDEA and Voc Rehab, and community participation, not segregation, employment, etc. This is what HCBS, Home and Community-Based Service waivers, are now supposed to be about, not fixing broken people and isolating them and segregating them. So here's where we are. We got a big problem coming, and you got waiting lists and budget shortfalls. We got to shift. And one of the things we got to do is change our language. Implicit bias is being used a lot the last few years regarding racial discrimination. True. It also applies to disability discrimination because the stigma is alive and well and learned as we grow up. Think about every word you say and what it means to somebody else that you may not get. As Frank Luntz, tremendous public relations pollster, it's not what you say, it's what people hear. You say the word cerebral palsy. What does that mean to somebody else? On a poll we did back in the early 90s when I was with UCPA, we actually had that done for us in New York and DC. 94% of the people interviewed on the street, when you asked them what that meant, defined spastic quadriplegia and drool. They had a stereotypical notion of somebody who was experiencing CP, not understanding the range of functional disability. We could do the same with any other term. We've got to stop using that language because we don't know what it means to most people, but probably nothing good. We've got to move from the diagnostic label and programs to individualization. And this is stuff from Dr. Carter at Vanderbilt, probably the premier trainer researcher in transition now. He's on one of the videos that Chris referred to that we did for the council. All right. Expectations, change the path. What are you thinking and what's taught? And here he's using the same words. Change introductions from deficits and what you can't do to strengths, preferences, interests, gifts, and contributions. Relationships matter, location matters. He's talking about inclusion. Here is the Voc Rehab Act, 1992, major amendments. Individuals with the most severe disabilities presumed capable of engaging in gainful employment, and there's a presumption. And unless it can be demonstrated by VR staff, there is convincing evidence. That's a civil judicial standard. That's not a diagnosis, an IQ score, a functional whatever. You've got to be able to demonstrate we've tried things and this person can't work. Well, with supported and customized employment, that's not going to happen. If done with fidelity, here's the outcomes. And again, look at the language in regulation: strengths, resources, priorities, concerns, informed choice. And then we get to choice and we look at this data from our friends at the National Core Indicators and ICI. This is a few years old, but I guess it hasn't changed. Of the people who were in the data across the country, 34 states, 85% had no paid job. The third-party interviewer did a very preliminary, would you like a job or not? We know inadequate, but that question, 5% who weren't said yes, and then they went and pulled up their paperwork, and guess what? Of that 47%, 70% had no goal. Why? Because the service coordinator, case manager didn't have the expectation, and I'm sorry, didn't even ask the question to the person, would they like to work or should we talk about employment? So once again, who's got the problem? The person with the label or those of us in the system who are stuck with stereotypical limitations and expectations? Beautiful chart. This is by Mike Callahan from Mark Gold and Associates, differentiating between supported employment and customized, totally different. And customized starts with discovery. Supported employment basically says that there are people who need a little help in finding a job and maybe a little support on the job, both paid or natural. Customized is totally different, takes more work generally on the front end. Supported employment has almost nothing. Again, you can look at this. There's a video from Dr. Stephen Hunt in the North Carolina series. I suggest you look at that. And again, we don't do assessments. We do descriptive writing, 0 reject and 0 failure with fidelity and competency. I can't stress those terms enough. And we've got to cultivate the employers and businesses and maintain strong relationships. We still don't do that as well as we need to. And there are great pieces now being done from VCU by Dr. Wayman, some work being done in a couple of states about how to really sustain those relationships, particularly during the COVID stuff, and it has worked. Again, everyone is job ready. We don't need readiness. We work on strengths. There are no prerequisites, and we focus on skills and strengths and exploration. Okay? Start with a meaningful day, not in the building. Get people into internships, volunteering in the community based on their interests. No larger than 3 people. This is from Sarah Murphy, who's also on one of the videos from the North Carolina Council series out in San Francisco, doing superb work with community integration and employment. So what do we got to do and where are we headed, folks? Well, we got to get rid of what we got. We got to stop talking about funding and talk about people and that kind of funding, and not just compliance with paper. We've got to really move away from the boxes and look at the whole person. So that's transformation and interagency collaboration. This is the hard work. We got to get from the same old street to a new boulevard, and we've got to figure out how to really work together. No one agency can do this by itself, all right? So we've got to look at outcomes now, and this is the definition from the Business Dictionary for those of you who are providers and are going to go through transformation. Again, it's not tweaking around the edges. When you're done, it will look nothing like what it looks like today. And I encourage you to look at one of the recent videos of a webinar done by the new Technical Assistance Center on Employment of People with Disabilities, run by Tash and Lewin. The agency modeled was SRVS from Memphis, Tennessee. Beautiful story of how they have done this and how the new agency doesn't look like the old, and how successful they are in transforming not only the agency, but people's lives. We've got to build consensus. We've got to get agreement that employment is important for everybody and it's a part of who we are. And we've got to understand the difference between supported and customized. We've got to recognize that there's going to be fear and uncertainties. Not everybody's going to jump on board, and that's okay. You start where the energy is and you move forward with that. And we've got to get a good business model. I worn the provider hat. It's got to work. So we got to get clear. Job development is the primary job that's cultivating the employers. We got to achieve outcomes and bill for them. Get paid for milestones, not fee for service. There's no incentive in fee for service, whether it's VR money or it's DD waiver money. Train, supervise, train, certify of competencies, make sure the staff know what they're doing and doing it well, and even incentivize them with fidelity and pay for performance. Can be done. We got to do it. We don't have a choice, and we've got to do it together because it's the right thing to do, and it's late. It's 2021. People with disabilities should not have to wait anymore for equal opportunity to be part of the American community and be a valued contributor rather than just a user of tax money. Interagency collaboration, a biggie and a tough one. It's not cooperation. This is much harder to do. I had the privilege to work with Dr. Bruner in the early 90s on family kinds of issues, but it's a process to reach goals that nobody can do on their own. It's a means to an end, not an end in itself. And obviously, our end here is increased rates of competitive integrated employment for all individuals, regardless of complexity of the disability. So we've got to jointly agree. It's a process. There's got to be shared responsibility. It's not pass the buck. Well, schools, if you had done your job, ours would be easier at VR. Or VR saying, well, it's not our job, it's the DD waivers job. Or no, it's the managed care companies. We're great about that, passing the buck, because we work in silos. We got to break the walls down, and we've got to truly collaborate and share responsibility and ownership that the state of North Carolina is taking this on, and it means all of its component parts must come together, all on agreement and joint responsibility, and that's going to take some time. And then you get braided funding, not blended, but braided, where VR can pay for this, the waiver can pay for that, workforce can pay for this, schools will pay for that, and how do we do it together? So from the perspective of the person, it's seamless, and I can tell you the taxpayer doesn't give a darn which pocket it's coming out of. It's still taxpayer money. What's the return on the investment? We'll talk about that. This can't come from top down. This is not an edict from the governor or the director of the agency. This involves the people at the ground, middle management, coming together, working together, learning together, and then sharing the goals and the responsibilities, because ultimately the taxpayer is going to start coming forward. Even our best friends on Capitol Hill have begun to look at the data. I still am very active there. I chair the TASH Public Policy Committee, and so I'm involved in a lot of work in DC and know a lot of the staff who are still on Capitol Hill, and they're hearing us every year about the research and the best practice and the outcomes, and they're earmarking money, pre-employment transition services, more money for this, a little more money, lots of money maybe potentially for the home community-based service waiver, but they're also beginning to ask about outcomes. And we have got to start to deliver quantifiable outcomes compatible with the goals of the DD Act, IDEA, workforce investment, VR, and ADA, because we use those words all the time. Now it's time to put our money where our mouth is and deliver the goods. And finally, just to show you that we have the data, Rob Chimera is a PhD economist at Kent State, has published profusely, and as he told me early on, Alan, I call the numbers. If they hadn't come out this way, I would say that as well. But he's done many, but I wanted to share this one with supported employment is SE, sheltered work is SW, and he looks at the cost per hour, cumulative cost, and per dollar earned. And this is 2011, peer-reviewed Journal of Oak Rehab. It's only 10 years old. Why would we want to look at it? Plus all his other research. All right. And here's his final conclusion. Regardless of disability or severity, supported employment has a better return on investment in sheltered work. Ladies and gentlemen, we have to think return on investment. The money from the tooth fairy is not going to continue, called state, local, and federal government. We get billions and billions, and the outcomes leave much to be desired. So we've got to move forward. And as Jim Collins, I hope you know this author, Good to Great, one of his earlier books, Built to Last, said, great performance is about 1% vision, and I've tried to lay that out, 99% alignment. That's the collaboration. That's having the policy and the funding and the capacity to deliver the outcomes. So he says it starts with a vision and then a plan. That's the interagency collaboration. That's the capacity building that we're going to need in North Carolina to execute that vision. And don't forget, when we talk about them, disability is a natural part of the human experience. This comes from the 92 amendments to the Rehab Act. This is about those of us who are temporarily able-bodied. And I want you to think about, if you were to become disabled, which of these are you wanting to give up, including pursuing a meaningful career? And by the way, that's in all the federal language today. It's not just job placement, it's job development and career pathways. So we have to think differently about that the person isn't going to be the bagger at the grocery store for 40 years. There's got to be career advancement if they even want to be a bagger at all. And that again has to do with real choice and preferences and strengths, and not where's the easy high turnover jobs, even in the current environment. People get to choose. And I want to leave you with this beautiful quote from a neighboring state, Patty Killingsworth. She's a managed care leader, TennCare, the LTSS side in the state of Tennessee. This is a quote she did for a congressional briefing a couple of years after WIOA. Access to employment is the most vital civil right because in so many ways it opens the door of all the other civil and citizenship rights that most Americans take for granted. This is business we cannot leave unfinished, that we literally cannot afford, morally or financially, to ignore, close quote. Thank you, Patty. And please go to the Tennessee website, Employment and Community Choices First, or First Choices, 2016 new 1115 demonstration waiver, no facilities, only supported community living, only community integrated employment with discovery and tryout and volunteering, and meaningful day. It's got some glitches, but it is working, and that's the future, I hope, in all states. And maybe when we do that, we'll get to equal justice under the law. And here is where you can reach me, and you will get the materials as well as a nice fact sheet on supported employment and on customized employment from WINTAC, the Workforce Investment Technical Assistance Center, which I encourage you to use as well. We will have time for Q&A. Thank you again, Chris, for the introduction, and Beth and Pat for the opportunity to be part of this fall conference.
Wow. Fantastic. Well, my microphone was muted, but I was saying amen, amen, amen throughout that presentation. So thank you, Alan. And now I want to invite Alan and Chris Egan back with us live by way of virtual technology that works to join us for our live Q&A session this morning. Good morning.
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 Good morning. Thank you so much. Wow, and I've listened to the webinars you've done before, and I'm always just right there with you. I mean, you say so much in a very short amount of time that we gave you today, but so appreciate the work that you do, and wow, just a lot to unpack there. So I want to, I guess, start off by asking Pat, are there any questions for Alan or Chris?
Yes. One question directed at Alan, and then I have a question for Chris. And folks, remember that you can add your questions into the Q&A box, which is beside those three little dots at your toolbar. But anyway, so the question for Alan: what is it that Washington State is doing right that is getting them to such high employment outcomes among people with really significant disabilities?
It's a great question, and I appreciate it. And Washington State has been a leader for a number of years. They had a very bold director of their Developmental Disabilities Agency who retired about 6 years ago. She fought with parents, she fought with providers, but she brought the data to the legislature. And in the state of Washington, when you enter the adult DD waiver, and I know we talk a lot about choice, you don't get a choice to say, I don't want to work. It is not allowed. You must take 9 months of employment-related services, whether that's volunteering, job training, tryout, discovery for customized employment. They have a whole menu of that. Consequently, parents know that, school districts know that, so the pressure went on transition to beef up the transition services. VR got involved in this because they saw the opportunity for more 26 closures and doing good work, and there's nothing wrong with that. Those are the outcomes we want. And lo and behold, the system began to transform. They have some great providers there. They have some great technical assistance folks who do national work. They do a lot of work with assistive technology. I didn't mention it today. It's in the webinar series. That's another key component. We don't use technology enough. Again, my bias, we're in human services. When there's another need, oh, what kind of professional or paraprofessional do we need, as opposed to what device might make a difference for this person to be more independent, more self-directed, and less reliant on paid supports. So they built all of that in, and it works. So they've got a long history of this, but it took leadership at the state level and eventually bringing along everybody else to say, okay, this makes sense, this can work.
Wow. And it sounds like a little bit of willingness to be open for a challenge.
Yes.
Chris, I have a question for you relative to the question that Alan just answered, and that is, how does the governor's executive order play into and help show us the way in terms of becoming more inclusive in our employment practices?
It's an excellent question. And our executive order focuses on state as a model employer. And it means that internally, working directly with our Office of Human Resources at the governor's level across all of state government, how is it we change culture, change attitudes, educate, all of what Alan described in terms of the importance of diversity and the capability that individuals bring to the table. So it's a lot of work behind the scenes right now. And frankly, the state of North Carolina is the largest employer in North Carolina. We should be doing this. We should be demonstrating this. We should be moving the needle on a couple of things. One, obviously, the numbers of folks hired. The second is we are still battling perceptions, potentially concerned with disclosing because of the continued need in general to help folks flip their thinking on attitude and capability and flexibility and the right kind of supports and how that looks different than it does today. So we are working to do a lot of things at the same time, and there's a lot of training going on internally. And DVRS has taken the lead on that, along with Division of Services for the Blind. So Division of Vocational Rehabilitation Services in North Carolina and the Division of Services for the Blind both are providing employment supports across the state and are in consultation with our human resources structure in state government. And I have to say, it was a big, big step. It took many years, and Governor Cooper taking this step was bold. It's not easy, but it's necessary. And we are pleased also with the significant support that's provided by Secretary Mandy Cohen and the recognition of employment as a social indicator of health and as part of a whole person health strategy. And I think as we continue to move forward with North Carolina's Medicaid transformation, along with Employment First, we're going to see all of this play out very differently. We have high expectations, but it also takes patience, as we've known. And so we have to keep positive pressure. As I'll quote Michael Small, in this case, it's systems change comes with constant positive pressure on the system. We have to keep moving forward. We have to continue to be consistent in our commitment, and it will pay off.
Wonderful answer.
Hey, Pat, and I wanted to just jump in here because I, as a person with a non-visible disability myself, you guys have both mentioned this, right, in terms of the attitudinal barriers, right, that still exist when it comes to employment. And I'm also struck by the fact of you are both parents, right, of children with disabilities. What would your message be to parents who often those barriers exist, right? Those attitudinal barriers exist not only from the employer side, but sometimes, the parents as well, in terms of guiding their loved ones into employment. What would your message be to parents? And then Chris, I'd love to hear from you.
Wow, what a loaded question. And it's a very important one. And I was going to pick up on something Chris said too, in terms of the stigma. Parents learn what they are taught in the community from the physicians. I'm sorry to say, check Lisa Iodoni at a little place called Harvard, who herself was a person with a disability, just before the pandemic, did a major research study on quality of life and the perception of physicians of people with disabilities. And I'm sorry to tell you, it still stinks. In 2019, physicians don't see quality of life. There were problems with ventilator access during the pandemic, 9 lawsuits in this country with ADA. My message is very simple. Demand inclusion in school, starting in preschool. Attitudes are learned. Little kids are beautiful. If you've ever watched preschoolers with and without disabilities, they may ask a question. Okay, let's go play. If the kid isn't talking, how come? Okay, I'll help. Kids are beautiful. By the time they're 18, it's a whole different ball game. And we know that implicit bias is learned. And I'll do my true confession. I grew up in suburban West Hartford, Connecticut. Never went to a school with a kid with a disability. But I learned on the other side of town, there was a school referred to as the dummy school. Well, in Alan's head, because I'm human, no different than if it had been of color or some other, variable, they can't be like me or they'd be in my school. We perpetuate that by segregation, self-contained classrooms, and those neurotypical kids are the next teachers, doctors, lawyers, employers, parents, and whatever. So the real long-term change has got to come by demanding inclusion. And for those who don't believe in it, again, read the research. You've got the North Carolina Technical Assistance Center. They're tied to the TIES Center. 162 peer-reviewed journals. If we do inclusion with fidelity, not tokenism, kids with the most significant disabilities do thrivingly well, and their peers without disabilities also do very well. They don't get hurt. And Dr. Carter, in his webinar for us, has pointed out now we don't need so many paraprofessionals. Peers do a great job with their peers with disabilities in the classroom.
Right.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Alan. I can't add much to that. I will echo all of what you said, including the importance of integration and inclusion at a very young age, and relationships then are developed and perspectives are developed. And that is a key in this. I think that's where we take major steps forward. And we're making progress on that. We got to keep pressure on that, though, as well, because it's people forming relationships and recognizing the person as an individual. Everyone has support needs of one sort or another, some more complex than others, but that does not take away from the value of every individual and the importance that they have as part of their community. The other is this. I would add one thing, and that is to parents, is we are doing better at trying to share information about how to get some help. I think I remember my own experience, and I was a professional in the field when our twins came, and my daughter and son came, and my daughter was born with more significant challenges than I would have expected. And when you throw yourself into that emotional space, I needed others to help point me in the right direction for services that I really kind of knew about, but not at the personal level in the way of receiving and receiving support for our family and for my daughter as we navigated those, especially those early years. And I would say to parents, you have to try to gather your energy, gather your community around you, but also search for information. Do not wait. I think information will come to you, but do not wait for it. You've got to be your own advocate as well in learning and seeking and advocating for your personal situation and for your child in this case, so that you're taking advantage of supports early on. And I think that would be what I experienced at that time, is even in my space, I needed to reach out and do exploration and digging to figure out what our journey would look like and where we could get supports for that.
That is so true. And I would say too, when you talk about the physicians, I think that's one of the really the key points in my personal story is that when I was diagnosed with underdeveloped optic nerves at age 4, the doctor looked at my parents and said, you take her home and you treat her like your other 2 daughters, or you will make a cripple out of her, were his words. Right now, obviously that was in 1970, whatever. But the point there, right, is keep her included, right? Don't kick her out of the nest and treat her differently simply because her vision is, and assured them that if things got worse with my vision as a child, you want to stay safe, right? So I would be the first to come to them if things changed, that kind of thing. So I so appreciate the role that physicians play too in this at the early stages of a diagnosis for families. So
Beth, I'm
yes.
sorry to say that we're out of time.
Out of time.
We could do this probably for the entire day.
I was just going to say,
probably stay with us. Folks, you've done an outstanding job.
Yes, yes. And I want to thank Alan and Chris. You guys are our friends to disability in North Carolina for sure. We appreciate your just your wisdom and always willing to come and share important information. So again, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, and you continue your great work as well.
Thank you. Thank you. And now I'm going to turn it over to my partner in crime, Pat Kuehl, Operations Director for Disability in North Carolina, who will introduce our next roundtable discussion. Pat?
Thank you, Beth. Very hard to follow that group, but I think you're going to be even more bowled away, if that's possible, from this group of employment providers that we have here with us today. So when Cardinal Innovations sponsored this event, one of the things they were particularly interested in was to find some providers within our catchment area here in North Carolina who are doing outstanding work, and then bring their stories forward. So today you're going to hear from Amy Miller, who's the Director of Transition Services for OE Enterprises. She'll be talking about pre-employment transition services and what they're doing there. Jennifer Carter Barber, who is the Program Director for Community Works and for the Project Search Program and Supported Employment at InReach, North Carolina. Community Works being one of those programs where individuals are going out into the community doing volunteering and also inclusive activities in the community, as opposed to being in a day program. And then last but not least, Tim Blakecki, who is from the Arc of North Carolina in my favorite town in the entire state, Asheville. And he'll be talking about some of the innovative ways in which he's approaching employers and job development. And I'm noticing that I'm frozen on screen, and wow, what a picture to be frozen on. Anyway, let me turn it over to the three of them, and then we'll do Q&A with them.
My name is Amy Miller, and I am the Director of Transition Services for OE Enterprises. I've currently been in my role for approximately 4 years. Just a little bit of background information about me that will lead up to why I am doing what I'm doing now. I was a teacher, a special education teacher for 20 years, and felt the need to make an impact on a wider range of individuals with disabilities. Let me tell you a little bit about OE. OE has been in North Carolina for over 45 years now. We serve many counties within North Carolina. We serve Randolph, Montgomery, Alamance, Orange, Durham, Wake, Granville, Person, and are continuously growing. We offer services that have a wide range that are very impactful for individuals with disabilities. We have things such as vocational opportunities, community-based work experiences, in-house contract work, volunteer work service, and community integration. But my favorite service that we offer, and the one that brought me to OE, is our transition services. In 2014, President Barack Obama signed into act the Workforce and Innovation and Opportunity Act. And that was put into place to be able to allow employers to access job seekers that had the education and training and had the supports that they would need to be successful in employment. It was to make that match between the employer and the employee. So why that comes into effect with transition is part of that, the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act was that students with disabilities needed more training to be able to move into that workforce. So what was said is that 15% of the federal money that vocational rehabilitation receives would be spent on transition services for those with disabilities. So students in high schools and some in middle schools, if they're age 14, can access those services through different agencies such as OE Enterprises. We're what are called a community rehab program, where we do all kinds of things, like I said earlier. But currently, OE is we serve approximately, in non-COVID years, I should say, approximately 700 clients annually. We have 17 clients that we work with at Industries of the Blind. We have about 60 that do federal contracts for us. And then we have 100+ students that we work with within the transition program. So again, why did OE decide to do a transition program? We felt that it was very, very important for us to be able to make a difference in the lives of the students with the disabilities. As a former teacher, I heard over and over again from parents as I was doing their IEP meetings and we were talking about their transition goals. What's next for my student? What's next for my loved one? What's going to happen when they don't have the bubble of the public school system? And so I wanted to give those families an avenue, prepare their students for life outside of the public school setting. During pre-ETS, we do a variety of activities. There's actually 5 activity areas that we have to cover that lend themselves to being a strong employee later on. One of the major ones that we really address that I tend to focus on in our program is self-advocacy. We find that the more individual with a disability is able to advocate for themselves, to be able to speak up, to say, I have a disability and that is okay. Here's what I do well. Here's what I needed assistance with. And here's how the employer or the post-secondary college or university or trade school can help me to reach those goals. And so that is some of the things that we work on. We also work on workplace readiness, post-secondary options, job exploration, and work-based learning. We have found that as we have been running this program and have been accessing students, and we're actually in 4 different counties, how we've been accessing them, we're finding a bigger base of students that are actually coming into services for individuals with disabilities to help them find employment. We have approximately 22% of our client base that we have currently right now at this time that we are either in the process of looking for employment or we are in the process of they're employed and we're supporting them on that job. 22% of them have previous pre-ETS experience or pre-employment transition service experience, meaning that they accessed these 5 activity areas either through a school program like we run, where we go into the school system, or through vocational rehabilitation, doing some of those activities with them. Why I think this is important, why I think this pre-employment transition services are so important for employers, for people that are looking to hire employees with disabilities. It sets them up for success. It gives them a starting ground. They know more about the supports that are available for them, such as vocational rehabilitation, such as employment agencies that can provide job coaching services, long-term support. We also help them with things such like budgeting. We help them with benefits. We help them deciding why it is so important to work, that even though I'm earning these disability benefits, I'm also going to be able to earn money working, and how to balance that. So pre-ETS, our program currently is in the school systems. We serve Orange County, Alamance County, Durham County, and Chatham County. Within those counties, we have a wide variety of students. Like I said, they're ages 14 to 21. We have seen more growth and more counties reaching out to us. We help in so many ways, letting them know about what's out there. And what we have also found is that we're partnering with the local employers in those counties, because we're having them come in for guest speakers. We're going out to do job shadowing. We're exposing them to the workforce that is untapped. If a pre-ETS program, if a school system or a community is wanting to start a pre-ETS program, the first step is probably to reach out to a vocational rehabilitation counselor and let them know that that's something that you're looking into doing. And they can then connect you to an agency like ours, like OE Enterprises. The biggest thing is, what I like to take away from this is, as we prepare these young adults to transition into the business world, we need to give them the tools, give them the power, give them the ability to be successful. And also, we want to be able to have the employers know that they have supports, that there are agencies like ours that are going out there and providing them with the tools that they will need. Just some of the information that we provide to employers when we go out, that businesses who actively seek to employ individuals with disabilities outperform those that don't. It creates a more diverse work environment, and it also just builds a community around each other. It helps to show the diversity of our world. I hope you guys have a great meeting, and thank you for having me here today.
Hello, my name is Jennifer Carter Barber. I'm a director of programs at NREACH. One of the programs that I oversee is our vocational program. So I'd like to talk to you today about our employment services through NREACH. And just to say that NREACH has been around since 1974. We provide an array of services to individuals with intellectual developmental disabilities, from residential, community services, and vocational services. We have been offering employment services for around 20 years. Currently, we're supporting over 100 individuals with employment. So we have over 100 individuals who are competitively employed in our community. We support them with learning job tasks. So once they're employed, our job coaches or employment specialists are there with them on the job, providing that hands-on support to help them learn those job tasks that they have. We help them learn the culture of the employer that they're at, establish professional relationships with their coworkers and their supervisors, help them learn protocols and policies. We're also there just to help them be acclimated in their new role. We provide that training until they feel comfortable with their job, their supervisor is comfortable with them working independently, and then we start to fade away. During that fade-in process, we never completely leave. So we're there to help them maintain employment as well. So that could look like us being there once a month or once a week, just depending on what that employer needs and that employee needs. So we have a dual customer approach, that employee is our customer and that employer is our customer, and we want both of them to be satisfied. So we'll come back in to do any retraining if an employee has some new work tasks, or if they have a new manager or supervisor, or if the employer just wants some educational resources on how to work with individuals with intellectual developmental disabilities, or how do I work with someone that has autism. We'll come in and provide that support. We're there for teachable moments. If there's some performance issues, our employment specialists are there for those discussions and conversations. We're there to support the employer if they have any type of performance write-ups or things that they need to help the employee to get back on task to do a more satisfactory job. We're there to celebrate. We just celebrated with one of our employees last week. He made his 30th year employed. So we're there to celebrate those accomplishments as well. So in job development, we have around 30 or more individuals. I always like to look at it as we have as many people working that want to work. So that could either be that they're actively seeking employment as part of our job development. They're either filling out applications, going on interviews, or maybe they're just discovering what work is and what type of work they would want to do. They may be enhancing skills that they have through volunteer opportunities in the community, or maybe they're gaining skills. Tim mentioned Project Search. So we have a partnership with Project Search and vocational rehabilitation. So we have individuals that are job seekers that are there on site at 4 of our local hospitals, and they're gaining transferable skills right there at the hospital that they could transfer later on to a similar industry or apply to the hospital. So we're there to support those individuals that need to gain skills, those who need to enhance their skills, and those are just who are discovering what work is and how it benefits them. We have a strong philosophy of the employment first mindset, that anyone that comes in can work. You know, whoever wants, in those intake meetings, we're talking about work. Do you want to work? Have you ever been employed? What does employment mean to you? So I encourage all agencies to look at those intake meetings, look at those people that they're supporting and ask those questions around employment, even if they're coming in just to, you know, receive support at their home, or they just want respite support, or they just want community support. Let's talk about work in those conversations as well. As far as our Mecklenburg County funding, we do have a community works program where we're supporting individuals with employment as well. And through that program, we've also been able to provide apprenticeship work through Business Acts, where we had individuals, job seekers, on site at a senior care facility, and they were able to learn skills while under a nurse as a feeding assistant, and they were able to gain a certification to be able to be a certified feeding assistant. So those are one of the strategies that we have used to help job seekers gain employment. Kind of not been so much on those traditional ways of filling out applications or calling a job site to see if they're hiring. We noticed that a lot of the job seekers that we have, their applications or their resumes may get lost in the mix because they might not have the education on their resume, or they might not have a long history of employment on their resume, and they kind of get tossed to the side, or they get lost in that midst of other applicants. So we really encourage employer partnerships. We had a job developer on staff who played a big role in going out to different employers, making those connections, finding someone that was our champion, someone that understood or at least had some familiar relationship, or maybe a person that they knew that had different abilities, and been able to say, hey, you know, this person can really work, this person can do the job. So we have used that as a strategy to help us find employment opportunities for the individuals that we support through networking, having those satisfied employers go and talk to other employers and other businesses to see if they would consider hiring someone with a disability or have a different ability, but have the skill set for the positions that they have that are open. So I would just advise agencies and organizations that are not currently providing employment to try it. You know, definitely have those conversations in those intake meetings around employment first, around whether or not this person wants to work, if they have a desire to work, what type of apprenticeships or internships are in the community that the individuals can gain more skills and gain skills for employment. Thank you.
Morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Tim Blakicki. I am the Supported Employment Coordinator for the Western region of the ARC of North Carolina, and I'm also the instructor for AB Tech Project Search, an aspirational internship program for young adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities, centered on finding and retaining competitive integrated employment. I've been invited to speak to you today about how one job search specifically in the Asheville area was able to completely change the conversation around supported employment. I call this presentation that innovation is the job coach of necessity. When I was first hired to this position 5 or 6 years ago, traditional supported employment lagged behind other workforce development programs. I was told not to take rejection personally as I took these young adults or any adult with an intellectual and developmental disability into the community to find a job. I was told to know what I had control over, I was going to have to hold businesses' hands a lot through the process, and I needed to get used to hearing no. So much of this just did not make sense to me at the time. The pre-existing methods and processes of the traditional supported employment model also just did not ring true to my ear. It involved job development, sampling, resume, application filling out, sampling job searches through search portals, conversations, and as a nonprofit, we didn't have a large amount of money for marketing either. So we were depending on pre-existing materials. And then even when we did find employment, it was often carved, very, very, very customized, occasional and very tenuous, which all went against this kind of competitive integrated model that we were striving for. And potentially even more damaging to the concept was the way a job coach was positioned in between the employer and the employee. We created a system of codependency where the employer would describe a task and performance expectations, and then the employee would actually conceptualize and complete it, but the job coach was needed to actually interpret and create systems of support. Everything flowed through the job coach, and this just was not sustainable. Through Project Search here in Asheville, we began to change this model though. Project Search is a program that allows 3 internships over the course of a school year and allows for long lengths of sampling and things of that nature. Nick Humphreys is one of the individuals that came through Project Search, and Nick went through behavior health, EVS, and sterile processing. Upon graduation, we were able to take Nick out into the community and brag about how Nick was building surgery trays that audited at a higher rate than neurotypical paid employees of Mission. But Nick was not able to find a job. And it took me a while, but I slowly started to realize that the way I was presenting Nick to the business community of Asheville was the reason we weren't able to find a job. I was taking Nick and I was taking these clip art, laminated, Velcroed supports that we had created for him and presenting him to Fortune 500 businesses or S&P 500 and saying Nick can be a valuable member to you, but he was using supports that kind of concretize these preconceived notions that individuals had and businesses had of individuals with disabilities. I was allowing others such as advocacy agencies that used puzzle pieces to describe Nick as a mystery that needed to be solved. And instead, I realized I needed to reclaim the narrative of this job search and pitch him to the business community as an employee that had value and as a 21st century employee. So what we did is we scrapped our entire pre-existing model for supported employment, threw it out the window. I went to every workforce development board for neurotypical employees in the Buncombe County. I went to colleges. I spoke to people across the country on how they projected their employees or their graduates from their workforce development programs to potential employees. And what I found was these agencies were talking to businesses as other businesses. So I looked high and low and I found surveys by the Kessler Foundation, by the National Chamber of Commerce that proved in the 21st century, without a shadow of a doubt, with analytics, that this is a viable and valuable base of potential employees. We developed a new strategy. We were going to emphasize the reduction of training costs at the entry level with high turnover. We were going to showcase business to business affirmation. This will work. And we were going to show them that this is not a risk, it is a collaboration. And we did this speaking like a business. Did you know that reduction can be turned over in an entry-level position by 35%? hiring from the IDD population base. Did you know that businesses report on average an advantage of 80% in their market by hiring from the IDD employee population base? Did you know that 87% of customers say that they prefer a company whose employees resemble society? Potentially the best number out there, 97% of surveyed managers report that disabled employees have the same or more dedication to their jobs than neurotypical employees. This changed the conversation in the Asheville area. We set new goals. We're going to approach the business community in a different way. We reclaimed the conversation. We surveyed the existing landscape for successful initiatives, programs, and infrastructures. We used that perception changing language, and we spoke to businesses as a business. We also pre-answered questions that we knew businesses were going to have. Are accommodations expensive? No, in most situations, they are largely inexpensive. The Job Accommodation Network shows that 20% of all accommodations cost nothing at all. 50 costs less than $500 and 80% cost less than $1,000. But why should current employees take part in disability etiquette or training workshops? Well, current employees might have questions or misconceptions about people with disabilities or about a company's reasons for targeting this community as a recruitment source. We pre-answered questions that they had. And this, again, fundamentally changed the conversation. We no longer, even on the job, allowed the job coach to exist between employer and employee. Instead, we created a triangle where every tip of that triangle was autonomous and could work without the other tips. But we were there to support each other. When we spoke to a business as a business, we found that businesses realized that we were in this as a partnership, and it wasn't an act of charity. It was not an act of what's best for the community. It wasn't even an act of social justice. It was profitable. And what we found is that supported employment can be successful by leveraging these existing networks and opportunities. If we could only recognize this population as a sincere source of employees and workforce talent, and we made sure to meet our allies where they were at. There was no bad questions. There was no shame in not knowing something. But when we met you where you're at, we made sure not to leave you there. And we marketed these individuals as job seekers with desirable skill sets. And what I found was Nick Humphreys, who had built surgery trays and sanitized the hospital and helped their behavioral health department catch up on years worth of paperwork. We took him and we eventually found the Asheville Humane Society, who was looking for an employee who enjoyed repetitive manual labor tasks at 20 hours a week and had concrete tasks with a repeating schedule, remote supervision, and a changing cast of coworkers. And Nick has been in that job for almost 4 years now. There's a famous picture, Louis Daguerre, and apologies to anyone who speaks French, taken in 1838. And it's this really, really unique picture of a French street. And in the bottom right-hand corner, there's a man shining another man's shoes. And this picture is super unique because it's the first picture ever taken with humans. And in fact, there are dozens of people running up and down this street. But back in 1838, you had to stand extremely still to have your picture developed. This person shining this person's shoes is the only people that were actually in the picture because they were standing still. And this picture will forever remain super relevant to me because it reminds me that I can't run neurodiverse job seekers around playing the neurotypical game of interviews and resumes, but I need to slow down. I need to shine their shoes. I need to make sure that they are the star of the application process. Thank you for joining us today, and I look forward to any of your questions.
Wow, we could spend all day with the three of you and probably not cover all the ground. I am going to take a minute now to get some questions teed up. And the first we have about 5 minutes of Q&A. The first question I have, I'll direct it Amy, and then Jennifer, and then Tim. And it's a question each of you can take in turn. And this is it. What advice would you give to a provider who was just starting out to provide supported and customized employment services? So Amy, what advice would you give to the new kid on the block to help them become more successful?
I'm going to steal a little bit of Tim's because I think that's true, is to slow down, to really look at what the individual is wanting. What do they want for a job? Where do they want to go? But also to talk to employers around you and see what kind of workforce they're looking for, to see where they're having their deficits, and find that almost puzzle piece of fitting it together, what they need and what we need. We do that a lot with our transition services as well. We do both pre-ETS and project search, but lining up the needs of the employer and the needs of the individuals that we're working with.
Great. Jennifer?
Yes, I would definitely agree with that answer. Looking at job development, looking at that job discovery process, the individuals that you're supporting, what type of work are they interested in, looking at the network and the community around you. As for a job developer, looking at those businesses to see what type of jobs can be developed, doing those assessments, calling those businesses to ask, what their hiring needs are, being able to partner with them to fill those hiring needs.
And Tim, what would you like to add to that question?
Without stepping on anybody's feet, because that's exactly what I would have said had they not gone before me. I would also say lean on vocational rehabilitation. Vocational rehabilitation has doors behind doors of people who sole jobs are to help connect and network providers with the business community. If you only have 40 hours in your work week and you have to maximize that, and you're trying to balance it between neurodivergent job seekers and neurotypical businesses, let others do some of that work for you. That's what they're getting paid to do. Talk to your business relations representatives in your vocational rehabilitation office, and talk to your VR counselors. They've got their ear to the ground and they can do a lot of that legwork for you.
Hey, this is Beth Fatal, and I really appreciate the information. You mentioned and I just love the innovativeness of the information that you shared too. And I think one of the things that I hear you saying as you approach businesses now is that it's more of a conversation. It's more of a two-way conversation. I think about the feeding assistant position at Sharon Towers, and just the idea of where that wasn't even a position that existed, right? But it was about going in and sitting down, and that is so important in this. And I speak from a business perspective. It changes the whole mindset when you come in and say, talk to me about your pain points. Talk to me about your high turnover positions, right? Where are those? What are, well, people come in and again, I'm going to date myself, but back in the days of financial services, it was those repetitive type positions, right? High volume, repetitive positions. And ideally, they were perfect, right, for an individual with perhaps an intellectual disability that was looking exactly for that type of work. But the feeding assistant to me is such a success story of again the innovative conversations that are happening within employers, and so speak to that. I mean, are you finding that is more common among the employers that are reaching out or that you're approaching now? Tim, do you have some comments on that?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the ways that I always try to approach employers and speak to them about, we used to use the word carving, and I think that implies something that in 2021 is just not applicable anymore. Customized employment, also sometimes can have a connotation on it that it isn't appropriate for supported employment. But I often describe it to employers as what do you have that your employees are doing that they're overqualified for? With just a little bit extra time, if I could take 2 hours off their work week, if I take 3 hours off their work week because they're doing something they're overqualified to do, what would that allow them to do? What stack of papers is building up on the corner of their desk? What project have they been putting aside for weeks and weeks and months and months? Let me take those things off your plate. Let me support an employee in taking those things off your plate. And employers, once they wrap their head around that, they go across their employee base, 1 employee, 2 employee, 3 employees, and they start gathering tasks and responsibilities at kind of the lower end of the spectrum of what they're responsible for, and they create a job unto themselves. It's always so funny to hear businesses say the most dangerous thing that's ever mentioned in their offices is, this is the way we've always done it. But when you ask them to kind of look at things from outside the box, they get a little nervous. Innovation happens at the edge of your comfort zone. And I think the more that we remind businesses that, you'll see the needle move on this topic.
Excellent. Very, very true. And Amy, do you have anything to add to that?
I found what really works for us is if a new employer is coming on, is if we can go personally, like I like to go to those employers and walk around and walk with the HR person or walk with whoever's invited us out to see them and go, okay, let's look around and let's walk and talk. And as we're doing that, we are identifying some of those tasks, and I automatically will have names of clients that we've worked with currently or worked with in the past, or ones that we could even work with in the future, of going, okay, this could work. We could do this kind of job. And a lot of times the employers, until you do that piece, they don't see it. I mean, sometimes even having those conversations like Tim's having, they're like, I don't know, but we can walk around, we can see the day-to-day, we hang out there almost as an employee ourselves, seeing what's out there and what what their needs are, seeing that, oh, look, the tables aren't getting cleaned here, they're at the restaurant, we could maybe help out with that. So those kind of things, I think getting that one-to-one is great with them too.
Absolutely. Yeah. And Jennifer, I know you mentioned too, the kind of the healthy, right, model of the job coach, right? And you mentioned the fading out of that service. I know, often, and there is a balance there. As an employer, you invite individuals in to help support but speak to the healthy role, right, of a job coach. I mean, ideally they come in, they offer training and get that individual up to speed on the tasks, right, so that they can complete the job. But then there is a transition process out. I know from an employer perspective, I really used to emphasize the engagement, right, of that manager in that process, because at the end of the day, an employer gets better when we are inclusive and more confident, right, in our interactions with all of our team members, including individuals with disabilities. So could you speak to that kind of transition?
Yes, one thing that we have developed are employer letters and information to employers. So we have a thank you for hiring once that individual gets the job, and it explains what our services look like. It explains the role of that employment specialist. It explains the fade-in process, what it's looked like once they are able to maintain that employment. So keeping that constant conversation and discussions with the manager and the employer, making sure that employment specialist is there to notice anything that needs any retraining or any education for coworkers or the managers, to be able to continue that process, to help those individuals have a satisfied work experience and be able to maintain employment there.
Very good. And I noticed, Pat, you joined us again. Do you have any additional questions?
I was out there where Pluto resides, although I could hear you. You guys couldn't hear or see me. No, but I love the responses, and thank you, Beth, for picking up on that. We're coming to the end of our Q&A, And I guess my final question would be, what do we need to do to encourage greater collaboration and greater sharing of responsibility moving forward, so that our folks from the MCO, VR, ourselves, the schools are all working more in lockstep with each other?
Can I speak to that? I think a huge
Yes,
piece
please.
of that is sharing of information. Just getting that out. There's been too many times that I've walked into a classroom and working with students with disabilities in the transition program, and walked into there and I mentioned to the teacher, hey, is this student on the innovation waiver? Do you know if they're on the wait list? And they're like, what is that? I think, and I'm like, and this is a high school teacher that is teaching a self-contained classroom. They do not have a clue. So just getting that information out there and getting it earlier. I would like to see these transition services at the pre-ets. I would love to see them starting in elementary school, because we need to get that information out to those families. The earlier, the better, so that there is that connection. So then they have a plan from that. It can start in kindergarten and it can modify along the way, but those parents aren't coming to me in IEP meetings. They're junior, senior year, middle school. What's next? What's going on? So I just think that sharing of information, the collaboration is so important between all stakeholders and not being our own little islands.
All right, I am seeing another question or two in the chat box, but we're winding up our time, so I don't want to get us deep into that. For folks who've been posting questions, we will circle back to you, and there will be a recording of this on our website, so you'll be able to revisit this. I'd like to turn this over now to one of our partners in crime, Justin Francis, who is the treasurer of our Disability in North Carolina Board of Directors, and let him tee up a discussion around Social Security benefits.
Great, and thanks, Pat. That was a couple great sessions this morning, so I appreciate the intro. Look forward to this next session. I'll kind of tee it up for everybody. But one of the things that you see in especially the intellectual or developmental disability community is kind of a hesitation for people with a disability and their families to actually seek employment. They're afraid to lose that supplemental security income or the Social Security disability income, the SSI, SSDI. And so who we have here today is Pablo Puente, who is a Director of Special Projects for Service Source. And he's going to talk about this topic a little bit. And Pablo's a certified work incentives counselor and the director of the North Carolina Benefits Counseling Project, which I'm actually very interested in hearing personally, for a couple of personal reasons. But that particular project is sponsored by the North Carolina Council on Developmental Disabilities. And it's really funded to increase access to benefits counseling for those individuals with an IDD. So I'm looking forward to Pablo's conversation and seeing what that long-term goal of the project is, which is really to increase employment and improve financial well-being. And coming from Equitable, previously we worked a lot in the kind of the ABLE Act realm to try to increase financial wellness in a different way. So this is kind of the working alternative, so to speak, of what we were trying to do at my last company. So Pablo, without further ado, we'll kick off your video and hold some Q&A afterwards.
Good morning. My name is Pablo Puente. I'm the Director Special Project at Service Source, and I'm really excited to be today in the Disability in Fall Conference to discuss innovative employment strategies and best practices in support and customized employment. I'm here to talk about benefit counseling, and specifically about a new project called North Carolina Benefit Counseling Expansion Project. The North Carolina Council expansion project is funded through the North Carolina Council on Developmental Disabilities. This is a 3-year demonstration project and pretends to cover the whole state of North Carolina. The population that we're trying to serve here is the IDD population and their families, with the goal to provide access to benefit information and benefit counseling services to make informed decisions about employment. Why benefit counseling is so important? Well, you probably, as a service provider, you have the experience of being with a client that spent many, many years trying to get in benefit. So they were trying to get into Social Security benefit, maybe spend several years there, and sometimes money, hiring lawyers and so on. Maybe they were in a waiting list for waivers for many, many, many years. So it was very hard work. Now that they are in benefit, they start working and their benefit could be affected. So there's a lot of misinformation, uncertainty, anxiety in those clients. So benefit counseling is what helps them to understand the benefit, what explain what all those benefits that they've been working so hard, how they work, and what are the thresholds, and what are the eligibility requirements, so they can understand what might happen with their benefits when they start working. And the most important part, it will help them to make informed decisions about work. So when they are accepting that job offer, they know what situation to expect in the future about the benefit. Now, as a service provider, will help you having a client with and a family as well with a clear picture of what benefit counseling is, will help them to build that trust with the agency and eventually expedite those services, make it easier for you to do employment, vocational evaluation, and anything you want to do with the client in some level. Ideally, the employment, all this process will end up and conclude in a better employment outcome. So the client is able to accept a job, a rewarding job with more hours, eventually with a better pay. So how does it work for you if you want to know more about the benefit counseling? So there are 2 modalities to get into these services with the services in this situation. We have what is called the training, or we train CRP's staff. So your staff, your employment people that are in contact with the client, trying to do, that job placement and trying to get the person working, will receive training about benefit. They will understand all the different benefits that are out there, and they will know what to do in a situation that the benefit could be affected. So eventually they will know the threshold, for example, for Social Security. They will know the threshold for a waiver. They will know what happened with food stamps or maybe housing. So all those information that we are aware that it might exist and we don't know, your staff will have a basic information of the benefit and what to do in those situations. Another good point that this service will provide is ongoing support. This is not just one-time training where, maybe you go, you send your staff away for maybe a morning and come back with knowledge. It will be a continuous support, so they will know who to call if they have a question in the future. They will have refresher sessions with us. Our staff, by the way, are certified benefit counselors. So we call them CWIC. So they've been trained and they know how to do. They do this pretty much for full time for many, many years. So those professionals will be supporting and backing up your staff with benefit counseling and benefit information. And again, eventually, as the project progresses, we're going to build a network of agencies doing the same thing. So we're going to be part of a network of agencies, IDD agencies that are helping, each other in some way, sharing best practices, maybe sharing those challenges, what was really hard to accomplish in some point. And any other information and referral, maybe in this county, something's happening that might be implemented or find out in another county. That's the value of that, those services. Maybe you are here and you are not part of the CRP, or maybe you have a different idea, maybe you're a family. We also are able to provide benefit information through seminars to youth, students, families, family members, guardians, and working individuals. So if you have a working individual in your family who's an IDD person and needs to know about the benefit because maybe they're getting a raise soon and they don't know if you should take the raise. Maybe they're offering more hours, but the person don't know. Might they take more hours? We don't know. So we can offer a seminar with information and give them the tools to make informed decision in some level. Also, I want to point out that services are offered in English and Spanish in case we need to do this seminar with different population as well. Now, if you want to get involved, you can contact us. Service Source, again, is the agency that in this case we are part of this project. We're very excited that the council chose us to deliver this project across the state. Again, the project is the Benefit Counseling Expansion Project. The phone number is on the screen and the email is on the screen. If you want to get a little more information about the project as well, you can visit our website and find information about benefit counseling. To finalize, I just wanted to share some experience that we're already having with this project. So we trained, it's been several months ago already, we trained one CRP in the western part of the state. There were five employment specialists, and we provide, all the information again, how benefit works, what benefits are there, and so on. After the training, shortly after the training, it wasn't maybe 2 months after the training, we follow up with that agency, and they share with us that they receive a client who had questions about the benefit. They were trying to get a job, and the employment specialist, together with employment services, was able to share the information about benefit that they need to make a decision. Well, to make the story short, because we don't have much time here, what happened is that client ended making a good decision about employment. So the person accepted a job offer. What at the beginning they didn't know, because again, we don't know what are the thresholds, so we didn't know anything about how benefit could be affected. The person knew exactly what's going to happen with the benefit. The person knew what are maybe in some way the risk that was taken with this job, maybe what are the hours that could work and the pay they could receive. So the person accepted the job offer and is currently working a part-time job in this case. So those are the outcomes that probably you want to see in your agency, and again, makes it easier for employment specialists to get a job. So thank you again for your attention, and we'll be glad to hear from you.
Great, and thank you, Pablo, and also Pablo for joining us live today for some Q&A. Let you get on video real quick. Welcome again. So a couple questions I have for you. One is, how did you become a certified benefits counselor? What was the process like?
Oh, yes. Thank you, Justin, and good morning, everyone. And good morning to everyone in the audience as well. Yes, so to be certified work-incentive counselor, there are different avenues. Our program, we have four benefit certified work incentive counselor in staff. They started in the regional Social Security benefit counseling program called WIPA. So Social Security program is it's a pretty rigorous program where you have to go through a training process with Virginia Commonwealth University, and then you have to go to a series of modules, training, testing, and then final product when you build what is called a benefit counseling report, and you obtain your certification, which is it's called the Community Work Incentive Coordinator of CWE certification. Now, that's not the only avenue. That's kind of in some way maybe the most advanced certification, but there are other certifications that are there. I believe Cornell is offering a very good program, a good training. And you can become in some way certified through Cornell. It's a little different program, but you can become certified as a Cornell benefit. I think the name is a little different. It's not CWIC, it's just CP. It has some other initials there, but that's two avenues that anybody can really try to get certified.
Okay, no, it's great. And, kind of following up on that, how are you seeing in the initial stages of the project, like, how are you drawing people to know it even exists and where to reach out? Obviously, you shared your information on the screen a little bit during the video, so that's great. So the folks here can see that. But what are you seeing as something we might need to change to enable more people to even know that service exists and to reach out and get it?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So this is a new demonstration project funded by the North Carolina Council on Developmental Disabilities. ServiceSource actually has 3 different programs doing benefit counseling. So we have one, again, Social Security, which is targeted to specifically Social Security beneficiaries, right? So the benefit counseling goes to those individuals mainly. Also, we are a vendor for vocational rehabilitation, so we are also helping VR consumers with benefit counseling information. And the last one is not the last one, but the last one to mention is the North Carolina Council Benefit Expansion Project for the IDD population. So we have different avenues. We do have partnership already with different agencies through different programs. Like I said, we in this case in the benefit expansion, we are trying to target IDD agencies. So this is specifically tailored to the IDD population, and we're trying to reach out to IDD service providers. So we do have some communication, and we have some connection to the council as well. We have some partners already we have built. And it's been a lot of also research. We go also online and look for agencies in North Carolina. We are able to cover the whole state. So if any provider is in the audience that's interested, we don't have a restriction in geographic area, so we can serve any agency. And by the way, our services are covered by the council, so it will be offered at no cost to the agency. And in this case, and no cost to the community if the community wants to have one of the seminars for them.
Okay,
Justin, excuse me for interrupting, but we do have a question from the audience that I wanted to validate. Pablo, how are you coordinating your effort with the DVR benefits specialists?
You mean the staff that we train?
No. The state has some CWIC specialists as well, and I'm wondering how ServiceSource and this project is coordinating with them, because I think you and I have talked about that in the past.
So I think the question is, can you repeat the question?
Sure, absolutely.
Because we training staff in agencies, you're referring how we coordinate agencies.
Right. No, this isn't at the level of that granular. This is more at the high level. VR has some CWICs on staff, and my question is how is ServiceSource aligning with and coordinating so you're not stepping on what's DVR is doing, but extending it. And I kind of laugh when I say this, because there is so much demand. We could quadruple the number of CWICs and not reach everybody. Anyway, I need to hush. You go on.
Yes, that's correct. Thank you for that question. That's a very good question. Yes. Well, the main difference, as I mentioned earlier, is the audience and the population that we are targeting. we see the IDD population will have different needs. They will have, for example, most of them will be in some level of waiver. They might be more into the SSI benefit and so on. So the idea is to target, this program is targeted to the IDD population. The other, in some way, and you're right, the programs might overlap in some level, but the expansion itself is kind of like, we come with service. So I mean, Social Security covers the core of the people who wants to work. The thing with Social Security has their own requirement about employment. So they might target people who are in the higher stages or maybe working higher level, right? Now, vocational rehabilitation, if someone is in benefit, but is not receiving Social Security benefit, they might not qualify for what is called the Social Security benefit counseling program, right? So they might have their own needs in that regard. Now, we, for example, in the benefit counseling expansion, what we are targeting is families as well. Families, and we are looking for working individuals. We're looking for service providers as well. So it's a little different, the audience that we're seeking. And again, these services are more targeted to the IDD population as well.
Right. I've also heard you speak of it's a train the trainer model. So you're more focused on the providers, and you're also not focused on becoming these providers becoming certified CWICs. The intent is to give people enough training to where they can be comfortable about guiding and directing the customers that they support. And then as the questions become more complex, bringing them to the CWIC for the more complex interaction and planning. And there's a very long but wonderful comment in the chat area about the importance of educating people about work incentives, which I also know you're passing that information on as well. Folks, we could, again, talk about this for another day. We have at least 3 different conference days that we could build out over this one presentation and the others. Okay, so we have 1 minute left. Justin, do you have one more question you could?
Yeah, just maybe real quickly, and then we'll move on to the next session. I know there's a couple questions in the chat that we'll try to get answers, afterwards. But are there any connections between the employment aspects in the counseling, as in addition to kind of growing assets to help them from a safety net resource perspective?
Yeah, definitely. If we get to that point, we point out to different resources. In the future, we hope that if this initiative keep evolving, it will definitely connect with financial education and asset development for the initiative. But one of the tools that we recommend a lot is the ABLE accounts. I don't know if you're familiar with the ABLE accounts. It's basically a lot of people who are in SSI might start working, and pretty soon they accumulate enough resources to become eligible for benefit, right? So the ABLE account allows to save the money in that account and maintain the eligibility of client for program that might look into resources to maintain eligibility. So in some ways, it's a way to protect, the resources for and that might affect the eligibility for the program. So, and ideally in the future, we also would like to get into more financial education as well, right? Ideally would be to just explain a little bit how budgeting work, what is exactly more to get this definition of resource and income, and eventually move into some resources that might allow them to, we want to really improve the financial outcome of the people. I think that unfortunately SSI, we feel that trap a little people in that circle of low expectation for employment, don't want to leave the SSI, but SSI is way under the federal poverty line at this point. So we're talking about people that attach so much to themselves to SSI, might not see they are going to remain in poverty for a long time. So ideally is to show them this information, make sure that they understand what's happening in the financial situation, and hopefully give them the resources at that point that can make them move away from that situation. And I think SSI is good for some time. You are able to work. I would say, please go ahead, just take the chance, because taking the chance for the employment, you will see the difference in your family, financial situation, your personal situation as well.
Yeah, no, that's great, Pablo. I appreciate you being here today. It's great information, and I'm very familiar with the ABLE accounts as well. So I may send you some information with some context that might be helpful. So, but great stuff. And now I'm going to turn it over to our next session, which will be kind of moderated by Chauncey. And Chauncey Barnhill is our board chair of Disability in North Carolina. He does a great job. And he's also a senior vice president of Wells Fargo, doing some great things there. So Chauncey, the floor is yours. Thank you again.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Justin, for that introduction. I have the pleasure today of introducing Robert Price, who is a National Group Manager for Jurist at Microsoft in Charlotte. And a little background on Robert. He moved to Charlotte from San Francisco about 15 years ago, and he has owned and managed several restaurants in the Bay Area before joining Compass Group as the National Group Manager for Jurist at Microsoft. Jurist Dining Services has hired a number of people with disabilities through a supported employment vendor here in Charlotte, and Robert understands supported and customized employment and has some advice for other employers on working with job coaches. I'd like to mention also that Microsoft is a big supporter of Disability in National. So with that, we'll tee up the video, which will last about 10 minutes, and then we'll go to some live Q&A.
Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Robert Price. I'm the General Manager with Compass Group at Microsoft team here in Charlotte, North Carolina. I am sitting outside on a rocking chair, so hopefully that's bringing in a good feeling to everyone out there and everyone watching. So thanks certainly for joining. They used to say behind every good man is a good woman. I think these days they might say behind every good person is a good person. I got pulled into the world of supporting those with intellectual and developmental disabilities really because of my wife. She was the autism specialist for the San Francisco Unified School District. And we started doing simple things such as bringing all the kids into the restaurants when we were closed to order on their own or learn how to pay for things with a cashier or tour the kitchens and have some fun time spraying water out of the hose in the dish area or things like that. So that was really the beginning. And I started back then, I was a small business owner and I won the argument in the small business world with my business partners of employing some support employees with job coaches in our small restaurants. So I sit here today as a proud employer on behalf of Microsoft with the support employment program here at Microsoft. But I can also say as a small business owner of 7 or 8 restaurants that we used to employ support employees in that environment too. So I think the first thing I always love to say is that to any employer, regardless of your size, there's great value in having folks on your team that doesn't always happen, right? Microsoft is a beautiful, the CEO Satya Nadella has a beautiful ethos and mantra that there should be a job for everyone in the world here at Microsoft, regardless of your ability or disability. And I think they've recognized that they have an amazing toolkit, amazing practices that they're happy to share with anyone. So at the end of this, feel free to reach out and happy to email and share best practices of what Microsoft's doing. But they believe that there's a role for everyone. I know that in a small business environment, small restaurants that I used to be in, it was a bit more daunting initially because the revenues aren't there, that you're a little more concerned. But the morale boost for your own team, the customer impact, for those coming into restaurants or coming into large corporate facilities. It goes a long way. I think the short-term concerns of costs are greatly outweighed with the long-term reverberations of customer loyalty, employee morale boosts, things of that nature. So certainly a big proponent of having folks in. I think one of the great relationships that we've built here at Microsoft Charlotte is with InReach, a wonderful nonprofit that's helping support those with intellectual developmental disabilities find a spot in the workforce. So proud to say we have 2 support employees now here on the Microsoft Charlotte campus. And I believe throughout Microsoft USA, there's somewhere in the neighborhood of about 200 support employees. But within InReach, that was a selection or an introduction that Microsoft had made when we reached out to say, hey, we'd like to explore bringing support employees in here to do our part. Charlotte's a small office in the enterprise of Microsoft, but we wanted still to do our part for the community and for the campus, for our teams here. There's multiple nonprofits doing it. So once we made the connection with Jennifer Carter Barber and InReach to bring support employees to campus here, we went through a program of creating, not even creating, but posting job applications, knowing that we were looking to have those filled by support employees. And so reaching to others, typically cost is the sensitive issue, right? I think with job coaches, obviously they're in gratis, they're there to support, it's not an extra cost. The InReach job coaches have always been outstanding. We have a couple of very capable support employees here. So, as they've transitioned into new people, I think sometimes they're possibly over concerned, probably in a good way, that the support employees are doing their job or comfortable. I can say with one of our associates, they went through a lot of personal life issues outside of work, which started to manifest with some issues at work. And we had some struggles with mom and with the supportive employee themselves that InReach was really supportive with. So I think maybe a don't is not being hesitant to reach out for support or clarification to the job coaches, and, whether it's InReach or whomever else, right? They're there to support to explain, the number of hours per week that somebody can have, if that's changing with any medical benefits or, any issues that are arising. Sometimes they're commute-based or family-based, and those things are really outside the workplace and hard to diagnose when you're managing business. Buddy needs help sometimes. Everybody does, right? And COVID has been a great reminder that we all are fragile at different times. We all handle things in different ways. We all have stresses about certain things that we don't wear on our sleeves, right? I mean, I forget the exact number, but, X percentage of disabilities aren't seen or heard for people. So, we all have to recognize that everybody needs help at some point in their day or at some point in their week or month or life. And asking for help isn't a failure. So to me, it's always been changing the mindset of, I'd much rather you ask for help than apologize that you failed, right? Certainly in the service business, there are moments where we're all busy at different times, whether it's catering or the finance side. It doesn't really matter, I don't think, what enterprise you're in. But we all need help at certain times, and feeling comfortable enough to say, hey, I need some help is a beautiful thing. I know in personal life situations that most of the time, the asking for help is just to know that somebody would be there to kind of bail you out of the weeds if you do get in the weeds, right? You don't necessarily always need the help, but it's just knowing that somebody's there to help you. And I think, you know, for managers in business situations, you know, the job coaches are there to do that. They're there, you know, all of them, of course, are individuals with their own things going on in life that they may need some help at times too with staffing, et cetera. But it's breeding that mindset. But, you know, I couldn't be more of a proponent. We've in fact hosted events here at Microsoft Business Community Connects, trying to bring more employers to the table to say, listen, you know, the job roles that you're continually hiring for are typically lower level, and you having that turnover, you know, if you change your lens and possibly bring in a support employee, the loyalty, the retention, the joy that you create by bringing this person in is infectious. And it's there, and it's a great joy for them to come to work, whether it's 2, 4, 6, 8 hours a day, whatever they can handle personally. So it's, you know, on an HR front, on a cost front, on a morale front, it's such a win-win-win-win-win that checks so many boxes. You know, it's only a hope that we can do this more. Certainly current economic environments have people probably more hesitant, but it may even be, in truth, a better time to have more support employees in the world working.
Thank you, Robert, for that great information. We'll switch to the Q&A now. Thank you. It's good to have you live. Do we have Robert live with us as well?
I am live, Chauncey. Thank you.
Good. Hello, Robert. Thank you for joining us. And a lot of great information. One of the things you said that I found very intriguing was, you know, everybody needs help sometimes, right? And, you know, I had a big amen I was saying while I was on mute there. And a question I would have as a follow-up to that is, you know, what advice do you have for other business leaders who may be reluctant to work with job coaches or hire individuals with significant disabilities such as autism, intellectual and developmental disabilities?
Yeah, great question, Chauncey. So thanks so much for Pat and everyone for allowing me to be a part of this. I've taken so many notes. I think there's so much great information to glean from all of this. You know, as I stated, we hosted that Business Community Connect because in certain times I've spoken on behalf of Microsoft and Compass Group about hiring support employees, and I feel like whenever I'm out there in the world, I'm talking to nonprofits or parents or folks with disabilities, and everybody gets it, right? Everybody knows it's a win-win-win. It's the employers that are hesitant. They may just be unaware, right? You think about, you know, Alan's point about the dummy school earlier. What you know is what you know, and what you don't is what you don't. So it's trying to bring to people the concepts that it's typically not an increased cost. It could be a cost savings with turnover, and that there are many groups, whether it's Best Buddies, InReach, and several others. I don't want to not name them and feel bad about it, but that really can support the entire process, so that the local manager or staff feels comfortable, and you know, in bringing this person on, right, through the job coaching, through the hiring. You know, it's the morale win, the customer satisfaction win certainly outweighs the hourly labor costs that would be associated. And typically with reduction of turnover and length of employment that we find in the support employment arena, it greatly outweighs it. So to me, it's a no-brainer. It's just getting people to understand and business hiring managers and businesses to understand.
Yeah, great response. And I can tell you, as someone who's done a fair amount of work in this space as well, trying to educate my peers on the importance of being active in this space. I spend a lot more time than I think I probably should in 2021 helping people understand the return on investment.
Yeah.
I know we only have 1 minute left of our time here. It's going pretty fast, but To that point, what message do we need to share with other employers about that return on investment? You touched on that a little bit, but if you can talk to the bottom line impact.
Well, and that's what it's all about, right? We didn't start recycling until it was economically important, right? And we won't hire more folks with disabilities. And I should say one plug, Microsoft certainly does a lot in hiring full-time employees with disabilities as well, a massive program with an autism pipeline as well as support employees. So, that's there. And before I leave, please note anybody on the call that Microsoft's really willing and wanting to share their massive portfolio and their best practices to help other businesses alike. But I think in terms of ROI, it's letting companies know that it's not a loss, that it's an add to your bottom line. I found myself in restaurants lately, and who hasn't been in a restaurant that's short-staffed these days? And you walk around, and some people are getting frustrated. I find myself going to the manager and saying, "Have you ever considered support employees?" Right? I mean, they love to be here right now. Absolutely love to be in your environment. And guess what? Anybody who's out there who's probably frustrated, that lessens just by their ability to walk through your pizza restaurant or whatever restaurant it is, right? And what a win for everybody. In our restaurants where there was rolling silverware, some of those menial tasks, making skewers, those were jobs that certain people would get tired of in a quicker sense. Most of the folks that we hired in a support employment capacity, I mean, they would do that on a daily basis with a smile on their face, every day, and that's a beautiful thing. Right now, I think there's no better time to improve your ROI, to bring folks in, again, for all the different wins that I think we all know about.
Excellent. Thank you, Robert. Great information. And again, I could personally talk to you all day about some of this stuff. It's a topic that's but thank you. Excellent information. And thanks again for being with us today. And with that, we'll turn it back over to you, Beth.
All right. Thank you, Chauncey. So, wow, what rich conversation. And this is the focus of this conference is so different from what we have brought to you in the past as well, and in terms of the employment provider network. So again, thanks to Cardinal Innovations for hosting this type of conversation today. Really, really meaningful. Well, I'm excited now to share with you a video that has been created with the Disability in North Carolina Employment Collaborative Council. We're calling it the Disability in North Carolina NC Works video. And this video was created out of an initiative with the overall purpose to really include and increase employment opportunities for North Carolinians with disabilities through their in creating an increased involvement and engagement in their local NC Works career centers. And very excited to share this video with you because it's an example of how this conversation that we've hosted today with all of you, it's a demonstration of how we are working to change the culture, right? Creating more inclusive cultures, even within the NC Works career centers, right? That are out there across the state. So our hope is that as we communicate this out, there will be a link made available through our Disability in North Carolina website. But we want this video to reach far and wide across our state to help, again, become more open and have those NC Works career centers be more open to job seekers with disabilities. So with that, I want you to take a look at the video. Hello, I'm Beth Butler, Executive Director of Disability in North Carolina. Disability in North Carolina is a private, nonprofit membership organization empowering businesses across North Carolina to achieve disability, inclusion, and equality. This message was sponsored by the North Carolina Council on Developmental Disabilities.
Welcome to your NC Works Career Center. And the key word that I just said is your career center. Well, workforce centers, we're here to support people on their journey to a successful career. So some of the ways that we do that, we provide training scholarships, we provide career exploration, we provide help with resumes, work experience, and just whatever it takes to get a person from where they are to reaching their career goal. One of the first things we try to do when a person comes through the center is understand what those barriers are and help them to remove barriers.
North Carolina is an employment-first state, and roughly 2 years ago, Governor Cooper signed an executive order to that effect that recognizes the importance of people with disabilities to be part of the regular workforce, earning competitive wages, having every opportunity for a career. And our state right now is focused on the state as a model employer, meaning North Carolina as a state governing entity as one of the largest hiring entities in the state is interested to be really proactive and intentional in diversifying the workforce. We want to see people with disabilities have more opportunities to gain competitive employment, to have careers, to be more independent as a result of this, to have assets, all that comes with being employed. I really encourage you to ask and to seek out those resources. We're here to help.
Hi, my name's Jennifer Thomas. I'm with the Division of Workforce Solutions. In particular, we enjoy helping North Carolinians find jobs. That certainly includes North Carolinians with disabilities. Only about 33% of working-age Americans with disabilities participate in the workforce.
Employment impacts everybody. And NC Works Career Centers are a great resource for everybody in the community. Our initiative, North Carolina Employment Collaborative, works on just that. So we are hoping through systems change activities that there will be more partnership between agencies that work on employment services. We're talking about commerce, vocational rehabilitation, community college, as well as our business leaders in the community. And therefore, in the end, people with IDT are going to benefit from that partnership. As a person that has a physical disability, I am well aware of the stigma, the challenges, the fear at times that you're not going to find what you're looking for, or maybe it's not going to be a good fit for you. But the biggest thing that I want to encourage people is to recognize your challenge as a strength and find the resources, the information that can help you find that fit, help you find that job you're looking for. See yourself as an asset to an organization out there that fits your goals, your skills, those intangible things that you in particular bring to a job. There's always somebody out there looking for what you have.
If just 1% of unemployed people with disabilities joined the U.S. labor force, the gross domestic product could get a boost of up to $25 billion.
The mission of Disability in North Carolina is to empower companies for disability inclusion. Many of our companies are ranked some of the best places to work for disability inclusion in North Carolina. Employers want to source from all types of individuals, including people with disabilities, and they also want to hire people with disabilities because it's about inclusion of all types of individuals.
We want to ensure that all individuals with disabilities in North Carolina have access to their local NC Works Career Centers. So we want to encourage all job seekers, including those with disabilities, to leverage the services and supports that are available to them through their local NC Works Career Center.
Well, there are more than 700,000 working-age people with disabilities in North Carolina. And employers are looking for exactly the kind of skills and talents that they already have.
My name is Chris Hendricks, and I happen to have a condition called cerebral palsy. I am an entrepreneur, I'm an author, I am a professional recording artist, and I also happen to be a professional benefits counselor that works with multiple companies such as Aflac, Colonial, and others. For persons that might be looking to have a career, who have conditions that might be visible, I would encourage them to remember that Like you, I have a condition that allows me to uniquely serve other people. Persons with conditions are just so capable. The word disability implies that we're lacking in something. And I don't remember a time in my life where I ever saw myself as missing anything or lacking anything. If anything, my condition has always made me more capable.
I am a person who lives with a disability and the limits it provides on a daily basis. Limits don't mean unable. They simply mean I have to try a little harder. I was born with a disability and in spite of that was able to run a small business for 16 years, and now I work for a large company and earn a great salary. Previously in life, I tried to hide the disability that I had. I was afraid to tell anyone and had some negative experiences when I did disclose to other people what my condition was. However, I've learned over time that the best thing I can do is to be upfront with people and to tell them in a brief way that I have a condition, I might need an accommodation, and if that comes up, I'll let you know. My advice to an employer would be to seek out candidates with a disability because they have already overcome so many obstacles in life. Simply to be here, that they're going to be an incredibly hard worker irrespective of anything else.
Hi, my name is Philip Woodward. I am a system change manager at the North Carolina Council on Developmental Disabilities, also known as NCCDD. I am hard of hearing, I read lips, I wear 2 hearing aids, and I know American Sign Language. So anyway, there are many benefits to hiring deaf and hard of hearing people. 10 to 20% of the population has a hearing loss of some type. And so if you understand your deaf and hard of hearing employees, you're going to be in a position to provide better customer service for people who are deaf and hard of hearing, who are customers. Providing accommodation for your deaf and hard of hearing employees will help all of your employees.
My name is Jennifer Gray. I'm an attorney in Raleigh, and I am legally blind. I had been practicing law for over 13 years when I unexpectedly lost most of my vision due to a very rare eye condition. That was a very difficult adjustment period for me, but there are a lot of services available that have helped me gain skills to cope with that. I have been taking classes at the DSB Career and Training Center. They've taught me a lot of adaptive technology, including computer programs, screen readers, things that would help me get back into the workforce, and a lot of programs that I think would be reasonable accommodations. I would recommend that you get in contact with your local vocational rehabilitation office and see what services they suggest. For me personally, that was the Division of Services for the Blind, and I've been taking classes at the Career and Training Center there. I would encourage people to just not be afraid to ask for help. There's a lot of available resources out there. It may be hard to ask at first, but it's definitely worth it. I was interrupted in the middle of my career as an attorney, but I still have the same knowledge, the same skill set. I just have to learn how to do some things a different way, but the motivation is still there.
NC Works did help me out with my employment. Fortunately, I was able to reach out to Beth Butler, who gave me a few, phone numbers to call and a few resources to look up, jobs, and I was able to apply to a few jobs, and I got a few callbacks and was able to get an interview and was able to start working. Basically, told them that I did have dwarfism, and they, the person that interviewed me pretty much stated that that shouldn't be an issue. And once I interviewed, she was very accommodating, and I literally had everything I needed within a week of employment of being there. So they were very accommodating at Secure Care. So whatever makes you comfortable, just ask for help. Just don't be afraid to ask for help, because I wish someone would have told me that before, and I'm glad I reached out for help and it's been working out.
I would say if you need an accommodation or help getting through this process, be sure and ask, because there are resources there to help you find employment.
If you're a job seeker with a disability, I encourage you to leverage your local NC Works Career Center. There are services and supports available to you. Whether it's accommodations or other supports, I encourage you to ask your NC Career Center staff for more information. That video, as I said, will be made available through a link to our website and be pushed out to all NC Works Career Centers in early November. In addition to that, the work that we are doing with the North Carolina Employment Collaborative will include a toolkit of additional resources from webinars to trainings and one-page information. We're all working together to ensure that this information is made available to the local career centers. So with that, I want to thank you all for joining us today. I hope that the content that you've heard, and we've had amazing presenters, you've been able to take away something of value that you can take back and continue the great work that you are doing in our communities, in our businesses, and with our employers across the state of North Carolina, as we continue to grow this conversation of disability inclusion and creating workplaces that are open to everyone. I also invite you to join us next Tuesday. We have another Disability in North Carolina Fall Conference that will be focused on expanding and looking at industry best practices, unlocking your inclusivity. That will happen next Tuesday, October 12th from 9 to 11:30 a.m. And again, it will be around the employer conversation. So sharing best practices. Our keynote speaker, Lori Henneborn with Accenture, will be sharing key information and findings from their research, enabling change. So you won't want to miss that. Again, thank you so much for your attention, and a huge thanks to Cardinal Innovations Healthcare for sponsoring today's event. And thanks to Train Technologies and the tech support that they've provided in today's event as well. And with that, Pat Kuehl, thank you as my operations director, and thanks to our board of directors for their continued support and contributions to this great work that's happening. So I will now wish you well and have a great rest of your day.